Hi, welcome to the September 17th, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test to make sure everything is coming through okay. And we'll get started here in just a couple minutes. Hi, welcome. Okay, sounds like the audio is coming through fine. My name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America as a Steinberg product specialist based in the United States. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. So I'll be the host for the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you can just simply ask the questions in the chat field. When asking questions in the chat field, it's sometimes helpful if you could include exactly which version of Cubase. So I'm running Cubase 11 Pro, I'm running Cubase Elements 10.5, and which operating system. That information is often helpful. And if the ability to ask questions will far exceed my ability to answer them in kind of a real-time manner. So throughout the live stream, I will probably be behind, sometimes 30, 45 minutes behind. So if you have a question and you don't see an immediate response, we'll try to get through all the questions in order. But if we could try to avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would allow us to get through more particular topics in the live stream. We will try to have all of the topics indexed with timestamps, and that will be pinned to the top of the comments field. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to CubaseIndex.com, and Jan from Stockholm, who's on the live stream I saw already. He's set that up, so kudos to him. We have two people that serve as moderators in the forum. So we have Agent K, who checked in saying he wouldn't be able to attend today, and Jazz Dude, who so kudos to them for kind of keeping order. They're not official Steinberg employees. They just do this out of the kindness of their heart to help people out. So kudos to them. And also just want to give thanks to Jazz Dude, who does a wonderful job for Cubase users. With the Cubase Nation Discord, so it's a wonderful collection of tutorials and resources. That's a great source of information. So if you haven't subscribed to that, make sure you do that. So while, as a lot of people's work schedules have been affected by, COVID, you may hear my wife, who's working above me as she does conference calls, and my son, he's at school, but he may come in the last half hour just to tell me something. So I'll try to keep any disruptions to a minimum, and we will go ahead and get started. So, all right, so we see that Pablo has been able to join us live. So we've missed you the last couple of live streams, Pablo, so it's wonderful to have you back. All right, so we see a question from Uno Momento from Finland. So we just says, hope everyone's well. Question: what is the easiest way to record directly from YouTube to a Cubase track, for example? So many people will just simply have, one audio interface port, play back the YouTube sound, and then capture it directly into your audio interface that is using Cubase. One thing that a different approach that I've found, and basically YouTube will often use, and it could depend on if you're on Mac or Windows, but sometimes the audio driver that you're using on Windows is a different driver architecture than ASIO. So we have kind of, the Windows sound drivers like MME and versus what we're dealing with ASIO. On the Mac, you have Core Audio that's being utilized, but a different approach that I personally do, and I think Capwing might have a utility for this, where basically there's numerous like YouTube to MP3 converters where you could just type in the YouTube address and that will automatically extract an MP3 file of the audio of the particular video, and then you could just import that directly into Cubase. Some people will set up like loopback functions and like internal routing in the mixer, but that's may not be the easiest method if you haven't set that up before or don't have that currently configured. So, maybe check out something like a YouTube to MP3 converter. And, I've seen many producers just kind of use that, just, use as reference tracks quite easily. All right. And we see Peter Lawson saying hi from Ghana. All right. All right. We see Jay from Connecticut, who's going to be leaving his stream on, but he has family visiting. All right, so we just see, Greg, can I have your email again to send an audio, which will be the document for my question? So I may not be able to get to it today during the live stream, but it's always, you could reach me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, and we see Jan from Stockholm is on. We see Jazz Dude is on the live stream as well. We have Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas, and I'm not sure if it's Imrich or I'm Rich Morve from Belfast. Thanks for joining. Okay, just scrolling through. We're gonna just pop out my chat field to a different screen here so I could go through it a little faster. All right, and I see we have Tim from Mission Viejo and Robbie Bowling from Dallas. Okay. And we have John Costigan from Kenosha. We have Alexander Plasko. Sir Robert from Atlanta. All right, we have Stefan also from Sweden. Michael Pierce from outside London. Or we have Trance 2020 from Berkshire, UK. Okay, so I just see, can we have an option to, for example, select all tracks and MIDI tracks and changes all volume of those instead of changing inside track to track? All right, so let me just jump to another project here. So if it's going to be MIDI tracks, the volume can be handled, a bit differently. So, but if you wanted to, just select all of your tracks, like in the project window, you can come here, like all of your audio tracks, and you could adjust kind of the clip gain for all of your tracks. If you wanted to do that, you could just, select all the events in the project window. So that will work for audio, since it's not really the case for MIDI. If you wanted to, select all of the tracks here in the mix console, we could just hit, and if you have the mixer open, Mandy, you could just hold down Alt or Option plus Shift, and that will do just a quick, that will enable Q-Link, and then you could move one fader and they will all move proportionally. So if you release that, you could move them independently, but if you have them all selected, just hold down Alt or Option plus Shift, and you could adjust the volume there on the actual mixer. So, and even if we have those all selected and I just select one fader here, that will keep them, all the mixer volumes, excuse me, will be linked together, even if we only select this. So if you have like an editor window open here, I could select this and adjust the volume accordingly for all of the different elements in the project. So let me know if that works for you, Mandy, and thanks for joining us on the live stream. All right, we have Thermonuclear War from Serbia. All right, so we see Pablo apologizing because he didn't make the live part of the live stream. So we're just happy that you're back. So thanks for joining us. All right, and we have Daryl checking in from Oakland. Okay, so I just see from Peter Lawson, Greg, Cubase doesn't seem to have U-law algorithm and A-law, which is used for IVRs. So maybe, Peter, if you could tell me just what IVR is so that I make sure I understand a question fully. But if you want to just let me know what that is, that'd be great. We see Jazz Dude mentioning in Windows you could use the voice meter and for recording from YouTube directly into Cubase. Okay, so it just says I'm just starting with Cubase, Cubase Elements, and when is on, I don't have sound from YouTube. What do I have to do? So if they're sharing the same audio interface, probably what you need to do is to go to your Studio menu, to Studio Setup, select the audio system here on the left-hand side of your Studio Setup, and then just check Release Driver when application is in background, and then you should be able to kind of go back to your web browser to play something in YouTube, to then go back to Cubase and still be able to kind of share the same audio interface. So give that a shot. Okay, so we just see, hi, is there a way to move multiple tracks between takes? Just a question. Is there a way to move multiple tracks between takes at the same time, perhaps with key shortcuts, a little like playlist function in Pro Tools? I'd like to create comps of multiple drum tracks. Okay, so we'll just set up a new project here. So let's say, so if you want it to be like playlist, I would maybe use track versions for this. Let's say we'll just add number of audio tracks. So let's say if I started off doing lanes, I'll just come right over here. So if I just do a recording, I could now, if these are all selected, I could just say new version, and this would be very analogous to like playlists. So if I hit record again, I could just come right over here, and now if all of these events are selected, I could just say new version, and I think it's Command Shift N or Control Shift N. And let's say if we do a recording, and now if I wanted to switch between the different takes, all I have to do is come right over here and just say, okay, I want to go to version 2 to version 1, and we could select multiple ones. Now, if you've already kind of started by doing a cycle recording and they are in lanes, we'll show you how to do this. So let's say I want to now come over here and do lanes. So we'll let this do a couple of different passes here. And we want it to convert our lanes to track versions. So all I would have to do is go to my project menu and then go to track versions, and we'll say create versions from lanes. So now that I do this, I can just select all of my different, so I could have my original ones here, and now here's the lanes that were selected. So again, now they're just going to be kind of broken out if I hit the right modifier key. So I really like lanes and comp editing workflows for single parts like vocals or guitar solos. And then if I was doing multi-tracks for drums or for a full ensemble like a band, I would probably do where it's going to be utilizing multiple performances. Then I would probably start using track versions, and I think that will make a lot of sense for you, Ed. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, so we have Michael Marshall from Somerset, UK. Thanks for joining us. And we have Luthier47 from Atlantic City, New Jersey. All right, and Dasha from Serbia. All right. We have Key West, Florida checking in, one of my favorite places. I love the Florida Keys. All right. And we have Razel checking in from Denmark. Thanks for joining. All right. So I just see from Rasmus Novak. I'm not sure if this is for me, but I guess which version of Cubase do you possess? I'm running Cubase Pro 1103. All right. And we have Soren checking in from Sweden. All right. So we just have a question. Hi, Greg. I wonder if you've talked about expression maps. I'm new to the feature. I can't make it work. I work with East-West sounds. So, there's probably going to be different, note expression note expression maps that you could utilize. So we'll show you kind of conceptually of how it could work if you're using the, functionalities from like a Hallian based instrument. They could automatically be extracted directly from the particular, from a particular instrument in Hallian as kind of by design. But conceptually, how the expression maps will work is you could set up and create your own expression maps. And there's probably a good chance that for a popular library like East-West, that someone has already created these expression maps that you could import. But if we go to MIDI and we go to expression map setup, here we could, click on plus, we could, add a map. And then what we could do is at this point, we could say, okay, when I go to my violin 1, we could say this remote key. And we could also choose that, the status isn't going to be a MIDI note message. We could say it's going to be program change messages or, different MIDI CC messages. And we could define these, what this particular key switch does and how you want that to be displayed. So now when I go to a particular part, I could double click. And when we go to the bottom, we could say, okay, I want to see my velocities, but I could also pick and choose to see articulations and dynamics. So at this point, if instead of doing all the key switches, they could be recorded directly into the system. But as I'm here, I could just change these particular key switches. So let's say I want to go from a legato to spiccato for particular notes. And at this point, I will choose to say, okay, let's go back to legato here. And I want this to be pits. Back to legato. So this will automatically send kind of the key switch. And that would be kind of all you had to do. But, check to see if there are expression maps. These are usually pretty freely available. And then you could just load them up for the particular instrument. And then, you could, once you're on the particular instrument here, you could just say, okay, I want it to go to note. So as soon as we click here, we could just say, okay, I just wanted to go to the expression map, and you could see the expression map for the various instruments here. So once they're loaded up. All right, let's go through some more questions. Thanks for all the great questions. And if you learn new tips or tricks during this live stream, please feel free to hit the like button and to subscribe to the channel. All right, we see that the question about release ASIO driver in the background seemed to work. All right, and we have Cedric checking in from India. Okay, so we have a question. In the main window on an audio track segment, can I set a hit point in any part of the waveform and then sync the hit point to the cursor or to the left right position of another segment? Okay, so I think it's not necessarily a hit point that's doing it. Seems like maybe you want like a sync point. All right, so let's take a look at it. So I'll just do new project here. Or maybe I'll just jump to one. It will work. Okay, so if you wanted to, so if when we come here, if you wanted to add your own hit points, you can just hold down kind of the Alt key. While you're in the hit points editor, you can just kind of drop, a hit point in kind of wherever you want. So you just kind of click. And then you could drop hit points in. But I think what you want to do is maybe where, let's say if we come over here, I'll just hide my region editor. And if we click on this little function of let me just find a particular. Okay, so once we have this, we see this little icon here. So we have this thing called like a sync point, okay, or a snap point. So if I want this part of the waveform, so let's say this is like a pickup note, it goes da 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 boom, and this is like where the downbeat should be. What we could do is now that I've moved that snap point, once we have snap turned on here, and you can do that by hitting the letter J on your computer keyboard. Instead of it kind of snapping to the beginning, we could just move the event, and that will serve as kind of the snap point. So as we just come right over here, instead of it snapping to the beginning, just this part where we have this little snap point defined, that will be the part that actually snaps to it. So if we want it to move that particular event, just make sure that you see like these two little almost like flags. Make sure that that is turned on in the sample editor, and then you should see the snap point here with a little S, and move that wherever you want. And now that will be kind of the snap point, and you can move events to that or move that, to the grid, even if it isn't at the beginning of the audio file. So let me know if that works for you. And if not, we could just simply, so let us know if that works. All right, so we see a question. How can I color multiple tracks at the same time? It takes me forever when setting up a new session. Okay, so let's say I'm doing a new session. All right, so I'm going to add a number of tracks. Okay, so if I wanted all of these tracks here to be the same color, all you'd have to do is select the color tool, and then you could just choose the color right here. Then all the events, all the tracks can be that color. So select all the tracks that you want. So if I wanted these to be a different color, select the color tool, and then you can just come right there and select multiple, change the color of multiple events quite quickly. All right, so we see Peter Lawson just saying IVR is integrated voice response and is the information companies give to customers over the phone. So I'm not sure if Cubase has support for that. It might be a Wavelab type of thing. I could look into it, but I don't think that there's IVR support necessarily in Cubase. All right. Okay, so we have, let's see, from Soren. So question part one, I want Spectral Layers Playhead to always be in view when I select a loop region in Cubase Pro and start SL and zoom in more than the loop region in Cubase. Okay, so let's... Okay, so let me make sure. Okay, so when I select a loop region in Cubase Pro 11 and start Spectral Layers, the zoom in more than the loop region in Cubase. So let's go ahead and open up Spectral Layers. So let's say I have this set to... Okay, so I'll select this. Let's get to Spectral Layers. So it might be that Spectral Layers is dealing with the whole file and not just a segment, especially when doing with ARA, but let's take a look. Okay, so we've launched this. So when I select the loop region in Cubase Pro and start Spectral Layers and zoom in more than the loop region in Cubase. All right, so I don't think between an ARA and the Cubase project window that that's going to be synchronized. But let me just... So I don't think that that is going to synchronize between the two different editing environments. So I'm just going to read it again. Start Spectral Layer and zoom in more than the loop region in Cubase. Yes, I don't think that, you know, even the sample editor in Cubase isn't synced to kind of like the MIDI key editor or the drum editor. And second part of the question, the Spectral Layers playhead is followed all the way from left to right, but when it starts at left in Cubase, it is not followed in Spectral Layers. Do I have some setting wrong? Is it a bug? Okay, so let's say if I start here. Okay, so let's say if I'm... So it says then the SL playhead is followed by the way from left to right, but when it starts over in the left at Cubase, it's not followed in Spectral Layers. Could be that it's not the active window. But let's say if I start it here. So I think it's, you know, whatever kind of initiates the transport, we'll set that. And, you know, some of this I think deals to, you know, some of the specifications of ARA2. I could find out for sure if you want, but I think it's kind of wherever you instantiate the sync that it will kind of be set. So I could understand how that, you know, because they are two separate environments, and it's not you know, it's an extension, but not necessarily, you know, the sample editor. So. All right, so we have Dan Freeman checking in from Atlanta. All right, so I just see a question about tempo detection. So the question is, I was watching a tutorial on tempo detection and noticed that they went into set definition from tempo under the audio advanced menu. What does set definition from tempo do? Okay, so let's say I have an audio file that is fluctuating in time. So let's go ahead, and I think I have a example of that here. So I'll go ahead and just do a quick tempo. Just set this here. So let's say this, we don't have a correlation of the bar and beat and the tempo. So if I wanted other tracks to follow the tempo of this recording, like I was sequencing on top of this, and I wanted to have the bar and beat and the actual file itself be the basis and have everything locked to that, I would come over here to my project menu and do a tempo detection. And now we could just come over here, and as we listen to it, we have our tempo, and we may just have to kind of put in the downbeat where appropriate. So as we listen to this, so if at this point we could sequence and have everything based on a grid, and a grid defined from the tempo of this particular file. Now, there may be other instances where you say this file was fluctuating too much, and I wanted this file to do a crescendo, or to not to do an accelerando or a retard, or I wanted the tempo to be perfectly steady. And that's where the set definition from tempo is. So when you look at this, we can see that every beat has a slightly different tempo. And that's fine. And Cubase can be kind of hyper accurate with this. So when I go to audio to advanced, I could say set definition from tempo. And I could embed this information into the file or as metadata into the project or into the... so I could have it in the file itself. So if I take that file to another program, that information will be there, or I could just store it in the project. So I'm going to say store it in the project. So now this tempo map is going to be mapped. It's going to say, at measure 6, beat 1, this is the tempo. Measure 6, beat 2, this is the tempo. And that information is stored within the file. So now what I could do is I could say, I'm going to take off the tempo map, and I'm going to say, I want this to be a perfect 144 beats a minute. So as soon as I disable the tempo track, I could say, let's make that 144. Now it's going to be perfectly steady. Or if I enable the tempo track and say turn it on, and now I said I would just wanted that to slow down and do a retard, or for it to speed up, or I want to take the tempo here where it's fluctuating too much, and I just wanted to kind of regulate it and kind of maybe compress the variations. So the set definition from tempo embeds all this information so that I could take a file that has fluctuating tempo and manipulate the tempo of it afterwards reliably and kind of correctly. So at that point I could, tighten the tempo, I could loosen the tempo, I could do different functions for speeding up, slowing down, or making this fit another project. So that's what that function is for. All right, so we have a special thanks from Johannesburg in South Africa for all the live streams. You're welcome. Hope it's helpful. All right. So we just see, Greg, I had this rather funny instance. This question at work on Wednesday, my transport bar just disappeared. I still can't get it back. I'm using the floating transport bar, Mac OS, Catalina, Cubase 11 Pro. All right. So if you're using kind of the floating transport bar, so, if you're using the floating, one thing that you could probably do if you just go to the, like I have kind of the transport bar here, on the bottom that's always kind of fixed at the bottom. But let's say if we go to Windows, if it's open, go here. So let's say when I look at my Windows menu here, I can see all my windows here. But if I hit the transport, so let's say I hit F2, I could go to my Windows menu here and I could make the transport panel the active window. So if I click somewhere else, this could be maybe set to always, to maybe be hidden under another window, perhaps. So, but see if you just go to the Windows menu, if you see transport panel as a choice there. But you could just kind of come right over there. But, I kind of had grown, before I think it was 9.5 or 10 when they moved the transport. I had kind of grown tired of the floating transport personally. So I was, felt like I was always having to move it. So I really like having the transport be docked on the bottom. So, and again, if you just go to the setup window layout, here you could just have that fixed on the bottom, but just see if it's still active within the project, just go to your Windows menu and then you should be able to make that the active window and that should pop up on top. So give that a try, Cedric. All right. So we see a question from Orrin Bynum. Can you show where to go to move your chords up and down by inventions and by octaves, please? So it's probably inversions, So if you're doing this like in the chord pads, so let's say if I was going. So let's say I'll just select. I'll revert this. All right, so if you want to do it in the chord pads, which is a question we get a lot, I could just kind of come. And, once you're here, you could adjust, the different. So on the bottom, you could adjust chord tensions, but if you wanted to do voicing and kind of change chords like that, but if it's just like within the MIDI editor, it's easy enough to just say, okay, if we think of chord inversions, let's say we have a C, a B, and an E chord, or G, B, and E. So let's say this is, if I wanted to take this and hold down Shift, now I could have a E minor chord. And now if I move the, the E of the EGB, I could just select the lower note of the chord, hold down Shift and the up arrow. So now it's GBE. So you say, oh, it's a G6 chord or an E chord with G and bass. So you could just kind of select different chord voicings like that. So you say, okay, now I just wanted that down an octave. So you can say, okay, now it's an E chord with the B and the bass. So you could just kind of select the chord tones and then just shift it up or down an octave and do different chord inversions. So let me know if that makes sense for you, Orrin. All right, we have Rolf checking in from Germany. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see comment is it International Language Day in a Cubase live stream. So yeah, I'm just the ignorant American who doesn't understand other languages well. All right, so just see question, e-licenser error in Cubase 11, AI, I'm not sure if it's OWL error. Is this at least one of the e-licensers used during that process was disabled and cannot be used for any license transaction? So if you get something like that, it could, I'm not sure if there was something that precipitated that, like if you did, upgraded an e-license, but often if you have kind of unexpected messages, just reinstalling the latest version of the e-licenser software will often take care of that. All right. All right, and we see that Michael Teams is on the live stream, so I think virtual ice cream will start for everyone. It's great to have you on, Michael. Hope you're enjoying your retirement. Okay, so I just see Peter Lawson question. Greg, how would you create background music for humor or funny TV advert? Few steps will be great help for me. So I'm not really a composer. I have a tremendous amount of respect for composers. So I may not be the best person to ask. I know for some of my friends that do jingles will just do like some really, and sometimes they just have such incredibly tight deadlines. And it's like, oh, if you get me something in an hour, that would be great, And so I've seen that a lot. So I know I had a friend who I think got a Revlon campaign for Revlon Cosmetics. And, he just, as soon as he got his Cubase, I think it was 10 or 10.5, where this came in just in Groove Agent, and he's like the guy that buys every new library, on day one and starts using it when it's, before all the sounds get heard. But I think he just came over to and used some stuff like in laser beams. So he would just kind of come over here and just, and just literally just, kind of sit here and play. And use like a tremendous amount of just presets. So he would just kind of come here. And just sequence between those two things. But, I'm probably not the one that you want to get compositional advice from. So I can play bass well and I can mix well and arrange stuff, but I'm not a composer per se. But maybe other people could give kind of a hint of how to do that. Okay, so just see, can you demonstrate working with R&B pack that comes with Groove Agent SE? I want to know how to make changes to the individual drum wave in the pads. Some MIDI notes are triggering multiple pads. Okay, so let's say if I just wanted to come, I'll just load up a quick, maybe kind of more of an R&B kit. Okay, so let's say if I have a pattern. All right, so it could be that when you go to your instrument pattern, so you'll have each of these will be mapped to different notes. Now you could have, once you're kind of using kind of the R&B sounds, you could have up to 32 velocity layers. So if I wanted to take, even a completely different sound. So let's say if I drag that sample, I could so let's say now I have a hi-hat here, and just find something a little more. Okay, so now if I wanted to, all right, so we have, let's say, hi-hat here. So let's say at this point, if I wanted to add that, I could have like a hi-hat here and the higher velocity levels. We see that we could have two different samples here. So the higher velocity levels could actually fire off a completely different sound. Now, if you wanted to, so it could be, when you're saying multiple sounds are coming from a particular kit, that it could be that pattern, that kit has different sounds loaded for different velocity levels. Now, if you wanted to change the actual sound, so let's say I now wanted to go to the instrument pad here. So let's say if I wanted to take this clap sound here. Let's say I want to take these two clap sounds. I could go to edit, and I could say, okay, let's just come here and change the tuning of multiple pads. And if I wanted to, I could say, okay, I wanted this to be louder. If I wanted to go to pitch, I could say, let's do our pitch envelope. So let's say I want to have my envelope amount. And so, or you could just choose to randomize. So let's say we have this hi-hat. So I could just come here and I want to take that hi-hat and we'll just randomize the hi-hat. So that it's not playing back the same pitch every single time. And if I wanted to take, maybe a different sound, so let's say I want to take this hit here and run that through a filter, I could just turn on a filter to classic filter. So now that little snare roll at the end. And we could also do an envelope amount. So there's lots of ways to kind of change sounds, but make sure that you actually have the, like every time you do it, that you could run it through filters, that you could have up to 32 velocity layers going on per pad as well. So there's a couple ways to kind of work with some of the R&B kits inside of Groove Agent. Excuse me. reading through comments. So thanks for all the great questions. So we see from Michael Pierce, he's looking out his window at a beautiful sunset, and you can hear me and a death metal band practicing in a house across the road. So this be an interesting juxtaposition. All right, so we see in my main session folder, I have the .cpr file and the audio folders, but I don't have, but I also have like 10 .back files. Is that right? Or are they supposed to be in their own folder too? So, you know, the backup files, the .back files will be saved at the same level as the main project. So many people will place them into a backup, physically create a backup folder, but Cubase doesn't automatically do it. So I know that it's been a feature suggestion for a long time. I'll make sure to kind of pass it along again, but that's currently the way that Cubase does operate. So. Okay, so I just see Cubase sees hit points a little before the first transient peak. I was taught to make the first peak to intersect the grid for best punch with rock metal, but that means quantizing still needs every note moved. So, you know, if you see like, you know, your hit points here, so let's say if we, you know, go to hit points, you know, you could just simply adjust the threshold, you know, accordingly. So let's say, you know, this is kind of where, you know, we can have the automatic hit point detection adjusted with the threshold. And, you know, if you just kind of, you know, so with threshold, those are all the hit points, and you could adjust the threshold, and I'll just make this larger so that it might be a little easier to see. So that when we go to the threshold here, so we see these two lines here and here. And as we open up the threshold, more of the hit points will go away. So if you see that it's, you know, where, you know, maybe it's a little early, you know, you could just kind of move the hit point. So I think if we just come over here, let's just select this particular tool that you could now I think it's the Alt or Option key. That will allow you to kind of add or remove hit points. But, you know, if it's a little early, you know, and, you know, I know sometimes, you know, my friends that do a lot of like, you know, really heavy duty double kick, you know, kind of metal stuff that, you know, they're always kind of sometimes worried about just how things look necessarily versus how they're actually, you know, being, you know, how they actually sound. So I think you're probably okay to, you know, maybe not worry about the particular element of just the kind of the visual of it. So. Okay, so we have a question from Pablo. Make sure I didn't miss any. Okay. So we could have independent visibility agents in each mix console. So yes. So if I come here, let's say I have, let me just create a new project here. Or I'll just open up one where we have stuff populated already. Okay, so let's say this is my project and I have my mix console. And let's say I only want to see this, so these particular tracks. So now when I go to my main mix console, I could see, let's say in this one, I only want to see input channels. And let's say if I go to mix console 2, that I only want to see drums. So I will say, let's hide our input channels. And now, because Pablo is a drummer, I only want to see drums in this one. So now as I kind of go back and forth between different mix consoles, they could all have their own independent visibility agent settings. And now if I close both of my extended mix consoles, I can see bass and guitars here just in this one. So they are completely independent. Okay, just find my spot again. Sorry about that. All right, so continuing on with Pablo's question, we could have independent visibility agents in each mix console, Greg, and that these are changed with keyboard key commands, maybe in the future, not too far. So let's say, let's go to visibility agents. So I think it might be kind of the active mixer. So let's say if I wanted to come to the visibility agents, let's see if we can do our key commands here. Okay, so let's say if I set up a visibility agent here for this, so to show tracks with selected. So let's say I have try it in my main mix console here. So select, everything will be visible. So let's say, and I'll just check my key command again. I'll try another visibility agent under key command. right, so I'll select my 2 guitar parts here. So it looks like, so if I'm in my main mixer and I hide those, that works. Let's come back into, so I just set up kind of the visibility agent to hide the selected channels. And it looks like that those key commands are for whatever the active mixer is. So let me know if that makes sense, Pablo. All right, so I just see in mixer screen, can we move the position of the playhead? So let me just... All right, so if we're in the mix console screen here, there is a transport, so you can just kind of move. So you can fast forward, rewind, stop, play. So if I just want to fast forward and rewind. So if you don't see the transport, just click on the settings and you should see the transport panel. Transport buttons right there. So if you have that turned on, you can move the playheads directly from the play position directly from. All right. All right, just find my spot. Okay, I found my spot. Sorry about that. All right, so a question from Nick. What's the best way to meet up with skilled Cubase users in Oslo, Norway? I'd be willing to pay someone cold hard cash for a couple of lessons. You know, I think one of the great things with especially software is that you could just probably hire someone to do it remotely for you and share the screens. So I know, you know, I do that periodically, but other people do as well. But you could do it pretty effectively. I do lots of support sessions. I was just helping out Jeff Berlin, bassist, today before the live stream. But there's probably other people maybe from Oslo who are on. And as Jazz Dude said, check out the Discord. All right, so we see Michael Teams has granted me 3 scoops of coconut cream pie. So that's great. Thank you. All right, so we just see a question. Will a Cubase update include a feature similar to the nesting feature now included in FL Studio? Allows you to have projects within projects. It seems it could be a pretty nice workflow improvement. So actually, you know, we used to do that pre-VST days or before Cubase SX. So, but I don't know of any plans. I usually don't know I can't, you know, I don't know of I can't really speak to what's going to be happening in the future. But, you know, that is kind of something that Steinberg pioneered back in 1989. But we've seen more people, there's a lot of confusion with that functionality. As there's a lot of confusion with that functionality when we had it as well. So I think having kind of a unified project, and many people have kind of, you know, projects that are just hidden and deactivated, and be able to kind of call those up. And you can have multiple projects open and drag and drop between them. So if I wanted to even say, oh, I really liked, these particular files, I could just take, so I could say, let's take these files and these files, and I could drag and drop right into my, particular timeline for the project as well. So it's pretty easy to do even if the project isn't active. Okay, so we see from John Costigan, "Hell, Greg, thanks for all your help on my current project. I have Groove Agent SE, Halion Sonic, and Battery 4 all contributing drum sounds. Do you have a tip, maybe using a Revelation drum booth to unify them?" So, so if you wanted to kind of, if you have, let's say, drums coming from multiple sources, one thing that could be helpful to do, John, if you wanted to unify them, I'm not sure. So let's say I'll do a new project. So let's say I have an instance of Backbone. So we'll load this up and say, okay, I just wanted a kick. Okay, so let me just make this a little louder. Okay, so let's say I wanted an instance of Backbone, and I was also using Groove Agent SE. All right, so let's say I want to play maybe kick from there and maybe snare from here. And let's open up another instance of, let's say, maybe a Halion Sonic SE. Right, and we'll say Latin percussion here. Okay, so now what I could do, let's see if I haven't done this in a while, but if I wanted to take, let's say I have one part, but I wanted to access drum sounds from multiple ones, I could go to, let's say, drum editor. And I'm going to just assign kind of or I'll do this on my Groove Agent SE. So I'm going to come over here and I'll just create a quick drum map from the instrument. Okay, so now that I have kind of a drum map, if we kind of expose this, I could say, okay, instead of this coming from the track, these might have to be MIDI parts. All right, so I'm just going to add one MIDI part here. Okay. But there's a way where you could say, instead of following kind of the track output, but where you could say, just see if it's on a MIDI part here, but you could route to not just the track, but to but there's a way that you could choose, and I could maybe have it for the next live stream and figure out what I'm having my brain cramp on. But let's say where you could have the output. Okay, so let's say if I come here, I'm going to choose a GM map for this. All right, so let's try this. So say if I have a GM map, that now I could say, okay, I wanted this to be backbone, and I wanted this kit to come from this sound on this track to come from Groove Agent SE, and this sound to come from Hallian Sonic SE, and kind of keep them all, have multiple destinations directly from one particular track. So maybe you start with the GM drum map, and then you can pick and choose what the output is. So you could have this be routed to any particular, if it's, playing this sound on one library and you go to this and it's playing the wrong sound, you could remap the O note and then send it to independent MIDI channels. And then from there, send it to independent devices. So you could have, 5 or 6 different drum machines and still see the pattern in one particular event. So I'll try to have a kind of more dialed in for Tuesday's live stream, but that's, if you want to kind of speed up workflow, that might help instead of looking at 3 different tracks. All right, so we see Michael Teams giving kudos to Jazz Dude and Agent K for helping out with the moderation. So, all right, so we have Matt Elston checking in from London. Thanks for joining us. All right, so it's on our question from Andy Lane. Let me just find it real quick. Okay, so Mandy's question, is it possible to change the volume or other automation for all tracks at once? So I think if you have, I think Mandy might be running Cubase Elements. So if you're running Cubase Elements, probably the easiest way might be to like just what we discussed before was using the quick link. So I think that works in Cubase elements as well. So if you wanted to come here, we could just say, okay, I want to, activate Q link and then move them all up or down proportionally. So you could do that. If they had automation, so let's say if I had a bunch of automation going on for this particular project. So let's say I'm writing all this as automation. So let's say we will now show our volume automation. All right, so let's say now if I wanted to go to my volume automation, I could, and if I wanted to bring down my automation, probably the easiest way to do this is just to come over here. Let's select all of our tracks. I could right click, and this is in Pro, but you could add a VCA to the selected channels. So if I wanted to just automate this, I could say, okay, we want to bring all this down. So we're going to have our written automation come in here. So now that I've written in that automation, let's look at one of the automation. We could see what my VCA is, how it's affecting that particular track. And if I wanted to have the automation kind of follow the result of the VCA, I just go to the VCA fader here and I say combine the automation of the VCA to the selected track. So a number of ways of doing that, Mandy. Let me know if that doesn't work for you. Okay, question. What is an easy way to transfer audio tracks from one project to another? One is just to simply, drag and drop. So if you have multiple projects, let's say if I wanted to go to this project, you can just simply, drag and drop the file from one project into another. And you can do that for multiple files just as easily. If you wanted to also just say I wanted to import tracks from project, I would just come over here and say, okay, I want to import these particular tracks. I could select all. I could, have the events and parts or choose not to, or I could choose to carry over the automation. I could put it onto new tracks. So just come here, and now all of these particular tracks were just added in, just again by going to import tracks from project. All right, so apologies for digressing, Greg, but is there any future plans for upgrading Halion 6 to 7? And if so, when is it planned for? So, it hasn't been announced, but, the teams are always constantly working on new versions of stuff. So, but sometimes they may not announce it until it's ready to go. Sometimes, it used to be kind of the running joke in America, like when the big music trade shows was, NAMM. And used to always be joke at, it stood for not available, maybe March. And then it says then it turned into not available, maybe May. So, Steinberg tends to announce stuff when it's released, but, I can assure you that the teams are always constantly working on stuff. So. All right, so you see from Dan Freeman, didn't the floating transport bar have a dot at the top that moved as the project played, and we could slide it to move the tape head? So let's take a look. I don't think that the floating, there is the project overview. So if I wanted to come here, we could choose to have kind of the project overview here, and then here we could select different parts of the project of where we want it to navigate to. So you can see that above the project window here. So like, let's say if I just wanted to do something that was maybe a little more involved. To show you more kind of an involved project overview, but people could use that to navigate kind of globally within a project. But I don't think in the floating transport that's there. So let's come over here, go to the setup window, activate the overview, and now you could just kind of come over here and navigate directly like that. But I don't think that was ever in the main floating transport. So. All right, so we see More Than a Conqueror saying greetings to all newbie fun. Got Cubase running without errors. That's great. Thanks for joining us again. All right, and we have Marcos Gomez joining us. Thanks for being a part of the live stream. See, Michael Pierce is probably going to be doing his tutoring. Okay, so we see a question. Is there a function that sets all faders in the mixer to 0 and or minus 20 dB except the master fader? So let's say if I had a number of tracks selected. So I think if I just... So if I have these on quick link, and we could set this to absolute, I could now hold down Control or Command and click. So anytime that I hold down Control, let's say I take off my quick link here, I'll just... So if I wanted to take just a single channel, so if I have this channel selected and I hold down Control or click, it could automatically set the fader to 0 dB. Now, if you wanted to take a number of tracks, we could enable quick link, and that's Alt or Option plus Shift, and we could group these together, and we could group these also in an absolute manner. So now when I move one, they'll all kind of snap to the same value. So if I come here and I move this 1 to 0 dB, they'll all move to 0 dB. Or we could just come right over here and say minus 20, and they'll all snap to minus 20 just by typing in the value there. So just by default, Control and clicking on a fader will set it to 0 dB. If you have the multiple tracks that are linked, they'll follow. And if you want them to all follow to the same value when linked, click on the ABS for absolute linking. So give that a try. All right, we see from PZone36, Greg, thanks for all the help over the months. However, you convinced me to buy Groove Agent after your demo. Cheers. Yeah, so it is still, I think, Groove Agent's on sale still. So it's, it's a wonderful opportunity to get it. And I think you'll love your Groove Agent. Really kind of use the Percussion Agent for a lot of stuff. So you're welcome. Glad I could help. So we see a question from Pablo. Could I buy the percussion library for Groove Agent SE? I think I already asked before sometime. So it's currently only a part of the full Groove Agent. But again, I believe it's on the end of summer sale that's still going on. So you can get a great discount. So in essence, what you would buy a percussion library for. You could get the whole instance of the full version of Groove Agent probably. Okay, so we see there are two major issues with Cubase which I have not been able to resolve to date. The first one is that MIDI notes don't quantize properly and always are not on grid. So usually when I hear this, it could be that it's that maybe I would check the quantized value of it. So let's say if I wanted to go to let's take a look at this. Okay, so let's say. Now you're packing boxes, ready to leave. So let's say I'll just come over here to the Mellotron. All right, so I'll just go ahead and look at it in the editor here. So now, so let's say if I set these to half notes, I select all the notes. So let's say if I set this to eighth note triplets. So make sure that you have the values. Sometimes I see people that will make come over here, take a drum loop, and come over here and say create groove. And then that drum loop now becomes the Quantize preset as opposed to the traditional Quantize settings. Now, if some other things that it could be so make sure that you have this set to, like the appropriate. So let's say in this, I probably want it to be set to, so we undo. If I wanted to clean like this phrase up musically, I'd probably choose eighth notes. So that would be my rhythmic value for the quantization. Now, some other things that it could be if you go into, if you're doing iterative quantization, so let's say I have these notes and they're both just slightly early. So let's say I'll just take the start of these notes. I'll just kind of slide it over here real quick. So let's say these notes here, if we look at it in the eyes of the computer, we can say, okay, that's early. But if we, want to, there is some settings for the quantize. So let's say we go to edit to our quantize panel, so here if we choose eighth notes, so make sure that you don't have swing on, but there's also kind of iterative quantization. So let's say in the eyes of the computer, this is perfectly on a beat, but I have my quantize strength set to 66%. Now it's going to move the notes 66% closer to the beat, but not be perfectly on. Now, if I wanted that to be perfectly on, make sure that the quantize mode here is set that the iterative quantize, the soft quantize mode is not enabled, and that will take it directly there. So, but, really haven't had any complaints about quantizing not working. But if you have a particular project that you want to share, I'd be happy to take a look at it for you. Okay, so we see the second question is that when I try to change the color of a track, it randomly sometimes changes the color of the full track and with the region, and sometimes only the region color changes. So a lot of times this is often kind of sounds like it's going to be depending on what is selected. So let's say I select this track here and I want to change its color. I could come over here and we could change the color and everything seems fine. But if I have this selected and I use the color tool and I switch, now I've only colorized this event because that event was selected, and we chose to, because an event was selected, the coloring took priority for the event as opposed to the track. But if there's not a track, so if we have our color tool and I want to colorize the track, we could just come over here and we could have all of the events kind of follow that. So it sounds like often when what you're describing sounds like maybe the event, like maybe an event was selected somewhere, so that when we do this, I go to change, this, that if nothing is selected, we could have kind of the whole event selected. So make sure that you don't have event selected when you think that you might just have the track selected. So. All right, so we have Tall Sizer checking in from Phoenix, and Romaldo Productions checking in from Florida, and we have Steve Scarrow from Pittsburgh. Thanks for joining us. And it's great to see Kai Wen Franklin. All right, and Romaldo's in Lakeland, so been there many times. And Kai's in Tallahassee. And we see in regards to the quantization that Dan had a great suggestion that to make sure that when something doesn't seem like it's on the grid, that maybe it's the auto quantize is enabled, and and it's easy to sometimes when this is enabled to have your MIDI performance quantized incorrectly. So. Okay, so we just see, help me find the multi-scope, please, please, please. All right, so if we wanted to come here, so let's see if it's still in Cubase 11. So it might have been... I think in earlier versions, it might have been just in the audio menu. Kind of like the spectrum analyzer. So we would kind of have this, or let me just see if it was a plugin, like and it might have been. So when, with version 11 came the frequency plugin. And if you have frequency, you could use this for, doing a lot of different things. So let's say I'll just take this off and I'll just run it from the control room here. So with supervision, it's a full monitoring package. So we could have, I think 19 different. So,
we played our records into the night.
So let's say I'll just.
I turn it up, you wouldn't mind. Up until now.
So if you want to see different scopes, I could come right over here.
Guess all along I was so naive.
So if you want to see like an oscilloscope.
Our musical history laid out on the floor. I've got to choose what's mine and what's yours.
So I think some of the old phase scope might have just kind of migrated into the supervision plugin. So check that out instead. I think it'll be a bit more contemporary. Okay, so we see, hi there, question. Any idea how to refresh the loops and samples top level icon view in the right zone? Some kits I bought, example, bouncy vibrations are missing despite installed in the library manager. So sometimes if you go to the media bay, you can come over here and look under VST sound. And it could be that you want to basically just right click and rescan discs. I have seen something that can be a little strange, and you might have to go into the preferences folder. If I've seen this and this happened to me as well. But if you go into library, and we want to go, and on the Windows platform, it's going to be, if you go to like the little start menu here and go to all programs, and you'd see Steinberg, Cubase, and then you'll see like the program folder, and right below that you'll probably see like the Cubase executable, and then something that says like application data folder. And if you open that, so I'm gonna come over here to my library, and then I just want to go here to preferences. And if you just kind of scroll down to Cubase folder here. So within this, there's going to be, I think if you go to Media Bay 3.db and maybe Media Defaults .xml, that if you take these temporarily, just move them to your desktop and let it be rebuilt, that if it's still not kind of catching the whole folder library, that it'll rescan and will probably show up. So look for those two files. You don't necessarily have to delete them, but try moving them to your desktop, and then see if the next time you do it, that those library folders that we see here, we go to loops and samples, that should rescan, and I think they'll show up there then. See, Kaiwa and Franklin likes the overview feature. All right. Okay, reading through more comments. All right, we see from Zofo, Greg, these streams alone make Cubase worth it. So that's great. Glad you feel that way. Okay, so we just see a question. How can I audio quantize a bass audio track that includes some faster licks? Okay, so let's come over here. Let's try this. Okay, so I just will take this really quickly, and I'm just gonna, just for demonstration's sake, I'm going to. Okay, so I have my baseline here. So what I want to do is to just kind of edit hit points, and we want to kind of just find like some rhythmically significant hit points. So we could adjust kind of our threshold down. So now once we're here, we could say, okay, I just wanted to even, create warp markers. So at this point, we could just kind of select the audio and so at this point I could say, I just wanted to take maybe just a little section. So let's say I'll just take these two bars, and let's say that this one little part of the recording was off. So at this point, once we have kind of the hit points, you could just, so we'll say, let's edit the hit points. And if you wanted to, you could say, okay, I wanted to, create slices based on hit points. And then you could just hit Q, and that could just kind of position and quantize, So let's say, okay, I want this to be quantized to 16th notes. You could just, quantize just events like that. So once you kind of do it, and you could also do kind of, warp quantizing. So let's say now I wanted to just take this one particular part. Let's go over here to, let's say, our quantize settings, and you can say audio warp. So let's say, okay, now, and just look at the part really big. And then you could just, hit quantize just kind of like that. So. Okay, so I just see a question. So if I'm trying to uninstall a former version by using the settings apps menus of the OS Win 10, I get the message that it isn't possible without the old installation file. Why is it so complicated? So I haven't, it's maybe, I seem to remember something, that I'm trying to remember if it was like with a particular update that, I know that sometimes people would have a hard time if they're doing an update and they needed files, depending on how it was originally installed, if they needed files from the original installation CDs from, and this is going back like Cubase 6-ish, that they would need to have like to update a file from the original installation, and this was kind of a Windows installation process bug that Cubase kind of got trapped into. But so if you could let me know which exact version it is. But I haven't had any problems uninstalling, just kind of using through Windows 10, just add remove programs. But if you could let us know, and it could be maybe that version was done before Windows 10 if it's a really old version. So if you could let me know, I think this is from Tall Sizer, which version it is, that would be helpful. All right. We have Rob Boddick checking in from Frankfurt. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have Cuba from San Jose checking in. All right, and JVI, thanks for joining us, making it out. All right, so we see a question on T guitar, recording with different pattern styles. How can I change the picking style in the track? All right. Yeah, so this is kind of sold in the Hallian marketplace, but it's not necessarily a Steinberg product. Let's see if we can get it figured out. So let's say if I come here, let's say I want to put on patterns. So I'll play a chord here. All right, so I think if we wanted to, so say we go to patterns here. I'll just slow down the tempo here, something a little more reasonable. All right, so now so as I just kind of have these notes, that we could have kind of, so we just kind of click on a particular key. So let's say, okay, I want it maybe a folk pattern here. But I think what you need to do is you could actually just click on the particular key and select your different patterns. So, but I can see if I could learn the T guitar, but again, it's not a Steinberg product per se, but it is kind of sold. So on the Hallian marketplace. So if I play kind of just a chord here, so let's say. So I just kind of hitting these keys here, and that will trigger different patterns. So, but you can get different pattern ideas there. So it's basically different key switches that will trigger patterns. Okay. So we see Dan Freeman just saying, oh man, I forgot about the iterative quantize option. Had to play with that. So yeah. Right. Okay, just finding my spot. All right, so we see from Patrick, it's just saying, I cannot think of another dog company that gives the customers so many great tutorials. Many thanks to Steinberg and Mr. Undo. See you at the next vid. So thanks for the kind words. Okay, so we just see More Than Conqueror. Hi, greetings from the Netherlands. Are there more ways to combat delay other than constrained delay compensation? Delay could be caused by, a couple of different things. So if you have, your buffer size set initially here to something very high, that makes it easier for your computer to work, but the higher the buffer, the higher the delay. So that is primarily when people, the first thing that people could do to minimize that. If you wanted to have your audio interface actually work, some interfaces will have a direct monitoring feature. Some interfaces like the Steinberg UR series will have direct monitoring with DSP, so that can help with that. But if you have plugins, like maybe a heavy mastering plugin in the process, bypassing that particular plugin, and we could do that by just, enabling the constrained delay compensation that we see here. That will allow you to do that. So there's kind of, again, two main ways that the delay gets built up. One is with the buffer size of your audio interface. So, it seems like, I'll just lower the buffer size just by clicking on a control panel. The lower the buffer, the harder your interface has to work. And then delays also get introduced by plugins. So, and especially if you're doing like a real-time tracking and real-time recording while monitoring plugins. So, and to mitigate the plugins that are causing problems, that's when you had to constrain delay compensation for, just so you don't have to go through and bypass 30 plugins in your project individually. Okay. All right, so we have a question. Hi, is it possible to write drums on the music sheets session? So yeah, you could definitely do this. So we had a question about this last time, and I played around with it so that we could get it figured out. So let me just open up this project. So let's say we have kind of a generic sounding drum pattern. and we wanted to notate it. So let's say I'll just turn this up. Okay, so let's say I have this pattern in my drum editor, and I wanted to see this as music notation. So what we could do is I'm going to first just come over here and I will open up the drum map for this instance. So we'll just call this, so we'll see our drum map. And once we go to kind of our drum map setup, we have these options. So I could say our C1 bass drum is going to actually play back, and for our display note for notation, this will actually make sure I have this right. Okay, so I can say my C1 kick drum, I want this to show in my score as F3. My snare drum, instead of showing it D1, which is the MIDI note that's triggering it, we want this to be at C4. And my hi-hats, let's say F sharp 1, I want this to go to G4. Now, we could also assign these to different voices. So I could say we want to, you know, for this maybe to be, you know, let's make this, let's say, so I'll choose my C1, my kick drum, and we want this to be set to say voice 1. And then our snare drum, we will set to voice 2 so that their stems go different directions. And now our hi-hat tip closed, we want it to be on voice 3. So now I will look at this in my drum editor. So I'm going to, let's say, go to our score view, and you may notice that, okay, it kind of can look, you know, closer to drum notation. I'm going to go over here. We're going to say, I want this to be polyphonic notation. And let's say if I want this to be down, down, and let's say for voice 3, we want this maybe to be up. So, and I want, so we'll hit, and I'll go to options, and we want to say use the score drum map. That now we could just come over here, and I think I have mirroring on. So, and then once you kind of have those settings, you can now just simply have the drum chart look like this. So we can say, okay, we're going to use our score drum map. We don't want it to be single line. We don't want it to necessarily be accidentals. Now here I have kind of an open hi-hat. And if I wanted to, you know, we could put different symbols for the open hi-hat. So as I just wanted to take this, let's zoom in here. So just to indicate on the page view that this would be an open hi-hat. And to play from the score, if you just hold down Alt and Shift, you could play right from that particular position. And now you could just have your drum charts kind of done. So go into the drum map for the particular device. And when you go to the drum map setup, change the notes, and you could also set your voice here within the score editor. Make sure that you have the, so when you just kind of double click to the left here and go to the sound settings, that you have polyphonic. staff mode on, and then you could choose for these to be down or up, different stems. So maybe I want the stems for the kick and snare to go down and the stems for the hi-hat to go up. And you could assign, up to 8 voices. And then, you could change the note head shape, within the drum map. So coming over here again, we go to the drum map setup. You can say for my hi-hats, I want it, that X shape, and then your drum notation will kind of look like that. It's pretty legible for drummers. All right, so we have a question. What's the biggest differences between Spectral Layer 7 versus 8? So there's going to be more kind of, some additional algorithms. There's going to be more like, some like de-reverbers, but there's more kind of AI, like artificial intelligence stuff for a lot of the algorithms. And there was just an entire, live stream dedicated to all the stuff that's in Spectral Layers 8/7, where they kind of go through all that in detail. Okay, reading through. Okay, so we have a question. What is the difference between the warp tool and the tempo detection mode and the normal warp tool? Okay. So let me jump back to... All right, so they're kind of doing the same thing, but, maybe to different media. So when we have our time warp tool, so we could enable our time warp tool here. And what our time warp tool is, let's say we have an audio file that was changing in tempo. So I'll just switch this really quickly. Okay, so I'm going to adjust my tempo here. Okay, so let's say my tempo is at 89 beats a minute, and I look at this audio file. What the time warp tool allows me to do is to come over here and say, this is where the downbeat is. And I move the bars so that the measures automatically fit with the music. So here what I'm doing, the music is staying the same, but the measures are moving. So this will, if we open up a tempo track here, so I'm just going to add a quick tempo track. So as I move, we can see that the tempo changes, but this is staying the same. Now, when we do warping in the audio event in the sample editor, what we're doing is we're keeping the time the same, but what we're going to do is when we enable free warp is that we actually just move the audio to match the grid. So in tempo warp, we're moving the grid to match the event. In audio warp, we're adjusting the audio so that it can match up with the grid. So very similar conceptually, but just one is affecting the tempo, one is affecting the audio. So same concept between them. All right, I've been granted also 3 scoops of Black Forest cake ice cream from Michael Teams. Thank you. Okay, so Kai Wen Franklin says, all right, I know there's a print money feature in Cubase buried in the menu somewhere. Give up the goods. Usually I found that when you come over here and you do an export audio mixdown and you give it to the client, that they give you money. So that's a good thing. So that's a pretty reliable way with good skills. All right, so just see, is it okay to use spectral layers on vocals? Sure, because a lot of times you maybe, I can remember an album I did initially, when I was 22 or something, before we had digital audio editing on computers. That was, where you didn't have to, buy a house to, a really nice house to get it. And I could always remember that, during this break, like we're just an open mic, and, like all the music stops and the singer does, sings like 3 notes before the whole band kicks in again. And the singer on this project accidentally just tapped her foot. And it was, just, you hear, like, as she's singing, you hear very faintly in the background, like a little, like, type of sound, right? And I was like probably the only person that heard it, but to me it was like nails on a chalkboard. So if you have a vocal thing and you just have some squeak, or someone just rubs their foot, they tap the mic stand, there's a lip smack, stuff like that it's a perfect, great vocal take, but you need to take out that one little element. That's when you could do stuff for, that's when, like, Spectral Layers is a perfect tool for, salvaging a great vocal track that has just something it captured inadvertently. Okay, so just see from Jeff Sabelski, glad from Chico, California, glad you could join us. Just a comment, the downloaded project Approaching Serious covers the absolute VSTs, each track, 25 tracks at least, 1 VST each to study the parameter settings for that plugin. Excellent. Yeah, so it's always really interesting to look at someone else's project and kind of backward engineer what they did. So... Okay, so just see from Dan Freeman. So Greg, when I create warp markers and go to audio warp, I see triangles at top, but I still have to click each one, and sometimes quantizing doesn't work. Can you run through this? So let me see if I have a project that we could maybe look at for this. One just I was thinking of here. See if I have it on this computer. All right, so let's say, all right, so sometimes, if you wanted to do this, so let's say, so one of the tricks, it sounds like, if we go to the hit points, and let's say I, find my hit points here. So let's say, okay, just kind of come here, find my hit points, and then try clicking and see if this makes sense, Dan. Click on Create Warp Markers. And now when you go to Audio Warp and choose Free Warp, all of those markers will be there. And then you could just kind of position this one without kind of moving. So you can say, okay, I just want to move this a little earlier. I want that to come in later. And you could adjust kind of as needed here. And since there's warp markers before and after, that those particular events will just be here. You say, oh, that's just a little late, or this needs to be, on the beat more. You could just kind of position that way. So try going to the hit points and then create warp markers. And then in the audio warp section, when you click free warp, they'll all be there. And then you could just kind of position pretty easily. And, and also to follow up on Dan's question, so, you can, once you go to the quantize, try just to set your audio quantize here and just put audio warp in and say, okay, I just want to do eighth notes. And then you could do it like that, but make sure that you have audio warp activated. All right, so a question, sorry, stupid one. If I bought Steinberg loop set and it has construction kits, where can I find, or even what are these? I can find only loops. So some of the construction sets, let me take a look, see if I have them installed here. So, but some, there were a series of actual, it was almost like projects that people would, like, so if you had to do like kind of a rock thing, I think this was in earlier versions. But let's see, we have like toolkits here, and so let me just. All right, so construction kits where I found, or even what are these? I can find only loops. So, make sure, so it may be loops, and sometimes there were kind of a set of construction kits. I think this might have been like around version 8 that, you could have different styles, and it was almost like a song. Like, so if you said, okay, I need to do like a metal thing, that you could have like the drums, the bass, and maybe you could play guitar over top of it, or you could replace different elements. So I think it was basically loops that kind of fit together in different songs. So if you had to come up with like for jingle really quickly, or just a quick songwriting question. So. Let's see. Does Hans Zimmer need an intern? I'm just asking for a friend. Wink, wink. So yeah, it's I'm sure he's, there's lots of people that work at remote control as kind of their starting off point in their film composition career. So, but you could probably check the remote control website. But there's, a lot of other stuff going on at remote control besides, Hans and other composers and music library stuff. So there's all sorts of great stuff going on there. Okay, so we see from Soren, technical question: can an uninstall manager make Groove Agent SE freeze? Okay, and so I'm not sure if an uninstall manager, I'm not sure which one you have, Soren, and if you say make it freeze, if it makes Groove Agent hang up. I guess if you uninstalled some components of Groove Agent, maybe. And the kind of second question is, does Groove Agent SE write to hard disk when starting up, or does it read from disk? So it will load the initial samples into the computer's memory and stream the rest from disk, and you could set the amount of how much is, if you go to options, you'll see kind of your preload amount here, and you could balance between disk and RAM. So if you have, like, 8 gigabytes of RAM, you may want to have this stream more from disk. If you have a lot of RAM, you may be able to kind of set it in the middle. So you could set the balance in Groove Agent SE of how much is loading up like initially and how much is being streamed from the disk. I see from someone mentioning, does Greg Undo need an intern? That's a real question. So it'd probably be really boring. So. All right, so you see about the Tina Guo cello samples, and I'm trying to augment a song I have with them. If successful, I will contact her to see if she wants to replace my sample performance with her live performance. Well, yeah, it sounds like a kind of an interesting process. So yeah, it'd be kind of cool if you do that. All right, I can see my mom is on the live stream watching, so everyone say hi to my mom. All right. Okay, reading through comments. So thanks for all the great discussions. All right, we see that Jarlath has the live stream full on 122-inch screen and a chat and a pop-out window on the next. So you have my chat on a dedicated kind of Microsoft Surface and one screen for my Cubase here. It's a good way to go. Okay, so we should see who has completed 10,000 hours on Cubase. So I might be there, so, and probably many others. Okay, so you just see Greg show how to bounce the mix, disable other tracks, lower buffer, show how to find latency of plugins, cut vocals with effects on Send Potato. Okay, so let's say, so if we want to say show how to bounce the mix, so let's say here I have kind of backing track and bass. So if I wanted to bounce this mix to free up resources, if I wanted to, I could just, one way of doing it, I could do the export audio mix down and just come over here and choose a single file, and I'll do a stereo out, and I could just say, let's create an audio track. So that's one method. I would make sure that my left and right locators are set accordingly. I could also just select the two files here and just go to File to Render in Place. We'll go to Render Settings, and I'll say let's mix down to one audio file, complete audio signal path, and we'll mute the source events. So, and as we do this, so it should create a new audio file. And just place it into our project window. right? So now we do this. This will be. So that's one way. And now if I wanted to come here and if I wanted to, I could select the events and have these tracks not only muted, but if I wanted to disable the tracks, and we could do that within the project logical editor or within the render in place functions. So if we go to the render in place and I have an event selected here, so let's say we go to edit to render in place. You have options of disabling the track, so that's how you could do it. So you could do an export audio mixdown or render in place. So now if you wanted to lower the buffer, go to your studio menu to studio setup and go to the UR24C, and you could lower the buffer then after if you've done that for a number of tracks. And we have a question how to show the latency of plugins. So let's say if I put a plugin of a multiband compressor here. So if you want to see like the actual latency that's imposed by a particular plugin, if you go to the main mix console, you could go to channel latency and enable that. And then we could see the channel latency here. And if you have multiple plugins, you could break down the actual latency for each plugin on that particular channel. So that's kind of a helpful thing to see. And let's see, one more part to the question. How to cut vocals with effects on the send. So, if we have it set to, so if you want to hear the effects on the send, to monitor, what you would do is make sure that you're not in direct monitoring. So go to your studio menu to studio setup, choose the Steinberg UR24C, and then at that point, or choose your audio interface rather. Mine's a Steinberg UR24C, and uncheck direct monitoring. So if at this point, while I'm recording onto this track and I have a send as a reverb, the vocalist will hear the reverb coming in right here. So I'll just say, okay, let's go to my Roomworks, let's say. So now I'll just come over here. So now when we're doing this, now one of the things that you have to be aware of is that, this reverb could cause delays in of itself. So that could be, that could kind of make it difficult for the lead singer or for a vocalist. But this way we monitor with the particular plugin, but it's going to be recorded dry. If you want it to record with the reverb in the plugin, we can go to the mix console and we have our input channels. So we could look at the input channel and put an effect here. So if I wanted to record with reverb that was embedded at this point, if it's on the insert of the input channel, that will be embedded directly on the system into the audio file and kind of burnt into it. Okay. All right, so we see from a question from Danny K. Is there an Android version? So for our mobile OS, we have Cubase. So it's very Cubase-like. It's not the full Cubase feature set, but you can run it on Android. So you could run it on an Android tablet. I run it on my Galaxy S20 phone. You could also run it on Chromebooks. So you could get Cubase for Android, and then you could, if you wanted to just at that point migrate it over to Cubase, you could download a Cubase project importer, And now at this point, you could just say import the Cubase's project and then continue on in Cubase if you need more power or more capability. But yeah, so there is Cubasis available. That's our kind of mobile OS version of Cubase, and it's been doing great. All right, so we see Frank just saying, thanks, Greg. Removing the MediaBay 3.db file and let Cubase rebuild it, solve the issue. That's great. Thanks for letting me know. I feel like I did something good today. All right. Okay, so I see from Frank says regarding the warp, you didn't understand me correctly. I meant the warp tool in the project window versus the tool that's active when you do the project tempo detection. So if it's just after doing the tempo detection, so let's say if I'm here and I'll just unmute. So, if we're doing kind of the warp tool here versus like the warp tool after doing a tempo detection, it's the same exact function here. So those are, one and the same. Just after doing a tempo detection, the idea after doing the tempo detection is if you need to make a small adjustment, that you could just make an adjustment. And as you make that adjustment, it will actually recalculate and do the automatic tempo detection from that point onward. So it just kind of takes you there. But the functionality between using the time warp tool on this window versus after doing a tempo detection, it's the same identical functionality. It just kind of takes you there. So you could make any little tweaks if needed. So sorry for misunderstanding. All right. Okay, we see from JVI saying revelation of the day, how to rewind, time warp equals moving grid to match audio event versus audio warp, adjusting the audio to the grid. Okay. Okay, so to see, have you ever tried to use oscillator frequencies to break glass or disorient insects? I won't mention that to my son about disorienting insects. But I haven't done it. But I saw a MythBusters thing where my son was watching, where with Meyer live speakers, like Pro Sound speakers, that they were trying to get the brown sound that would make people kind of lose control of their bowels at certain frequencies. So. All right, so just see from Dan Freeman, it says, I was missing the Quantize setup markers. That seems like selecting the elastique in preferences doesn't actually change the option when editing effects. So I think when you put the elastique option in the preferences tells you which algorithm to use for that. So. Yes, and this project here that we see, this is a Hot Mess track. Dark Glass, I think is the name of it. So check that out online. It's a hot new international band. All right, I see I'm slowly catching up. All right. All right, so I just see John Carver checking in. So from Seattle, it says new to Cubase. My mentor Russ Bishop told me to watch, and this is an amazing tutorial. So thanks to you, sir. So that's great. I hope Russ is doing well. I enjoyed seeing his pictures from Waikiki on Facebook, and look forward to seeing him in person sometime. Maybe when there's a trade show again. So thanks for joining us. All right, so just see, hi Greg, does M1 Mac work with Cubase Pro ineffectively? I want to know if there's a thing that I should consider. So there's lots of people that are getting great results out of it under Rosetta mode. You know, some components, like if you're going to be relying on Rewire, you know, that's probably not going to work. VST2 plugins probably aren't going to work well. So there's going to be a lot of audio interface drivers that don't work with it. So just, you know, but Cubase is running great under Rosetta mode. You know, I know that the team is working hard to get, you know, more native support, but, you know, it will, I'm sure it will come. But, you know, it's, you know, but people are running it now and very happy with the performance. All right, we see Pablo is back. All right. All right, great to see Best Korean Jesus on the live stream. See, Kaiwen Franklin says he thinks it's the sound of police cars that make people lose control of their bowels. That's probably a good point. At least raise anxiety. So. All right, so I think I'm kind of at the end of the current discussions. If I missed a question by any chance, just let me know. But I know we had questions that were sent in advance, so I'm going to migrate over to some of those. So thanks for all the great questions. And again, if you've learned something new, make sure you do hit the like button. And all right, so let's just migrate over. All right. So, and this was, we had some questions that were from Tuesday's live stream that we didn't get a chance to get to. All right. So we just see, hello, Greg. Last Friday's example of parallel processing with two group tracks made sense, but I noticed that the drum tracks were still playing through the stereo bus when both sends were muted. Would that cause a summing problem? So no, it's not going to really cause a summing problem. So it's good to take a quick look. So it's probably using the Amos Moses track to do this. And I'll revert this. All right, so I'll just select all these tracks. And what I want to do now is just to add two group tracks. And we'll make them two stereo groups. Okay, and I will go to my sends, and we're going to send these to, I'll select all of my tracks here. I'll send it to group 1 and to group 2. I'll activate. Okay, so now as we do this, and if we want to do like a parallel processing, which means that we kind of take the path And we're going to send our drums to 2 different destinations. So I come here and you notice that when I mute, because these are still are routed to my stereo out. All these tracks are still going to the stereo out. But now it's going to be combined with this group so I can get more gain. But when we look at the actual channels here, this is going to be, routed to the stereo out. And that's why you can mute these and still hear it, because it's not feeding the group directly, it's feeding it through the sends of the channels. So, and I'll just come here real quick. Sorry, let me just adjust these. Just get these linked so they're all sending the same level. So now, that's not going to cause any problems, but now I could route it through here and route it through this track. And I'll just put it on like a big dynamics, let's say just our compressor plugin, and squash it. So this track here is going to be the one that's heavily compressed. So let's say we just rewind here. So now I can blend this in. And still kind of retain the dynamics, but since the routing of this track is going to the stereo out, and then but also being routed in parallel to this group and to this group, that's why you could mute the groups and not worry about it being lost in the mix. Okay, so we just had a question. In the live stream a week ago, you gave an EQ example of how to change plugin presets, writing automation, but that doesn't work with VST bass amp or VST amp rack, as you change presets while writing automation, gain, or EQ settings do change, but not the amp or cabinet. To the program change is not taking effect. Neither works with third-party plugins as Amplitude or Guitar Rig. So how can program changes be automated? So not all VST effect plugins will respond to program changes. And I tried doing like automating, just loading up different presets, and that works with some plugins, but not the guitar ones. So what I would do quickly is maybe try a different approach and try doing perhaps direct offline processing. So let's say if I wanted to take a track, let's say I'll take my guitar track here. Okay, and I'll just revert this quickly. So if you want to try out different, if you want to switch to different guitar amps, and this will actually not even take any CPU cycles. So let's say, okay, here's our guitar parts. So let's say, so I'll take this and I'll just pan this in the center for now. All right, so let's say I wanted to do different offline processing. So I have this as an insert effect. I'm just going to take that off and let's listen to our guitar track dry. So not inspiring. So let's say I just want to take like the first one here and say, okay, I want to take that, and I'll just take my snap off. So I'm going to select just a particular region. And I will hit F7, and this will bring up our direct offline processing. So I'll say, let's go to plugins and go to our, let's come over here, say distortion and our VST amp rack. All right, so let's say now I wanted this to be, we'll call it a preset. So let's say a Vox. Okay, and I will do the next part here. I wanted this to be kind of more of a clean amp, and I wanted this to be let's say a high gain. And now I want this to be so now when I listen back to this track, we'll have let's see if I do it right this time. Sorry, let me just take just that portion. So, but you should be able to just kind of take this and do maybe different offline processing. So let's say if I wanted to even just will split, but should be able to take just one little portion here and render in place. So let me just go ahead and, all right, say this file here, I will just go to my plugin again. And I wanted a jazz chorus. So let's say this one is now running through. And this one could kind of run through like a Vox. So at that point, you could just kind of switch the different amp models. So you could just say, okay, let's go to the lead sound for that. And then when you jump over here to this file, you could just have different amp sounds. So you could try to do direct offline processing. So, but I'll mention that to developers. Okay, so we had a question. Hi, Greg. Up until last Friday's Club Cubase Live, I did not know what offline processing was. Since then, I've done a little research, but still trying to wrap my noodle around to file handling. Example, if I have a folder on my desktop named Kick, and then all it contains is 30 separate velocity layers of kick and wave file. If I bring those into a single track in an empty project and perform offline processing, will my original desktop folder containing the kick waves be processed, or do I have to go to an export as wave to that same folder? So let's go ahead and take a quick look. Thanks for all the great questions. We'll open this one. All right, so let's say I have a number of different snare hits here. Let's say with different velocities. Okay, so I will look at my folder here. So let's just go to my Explorer or Finder window. And we're going to find a project folder here. Okay, I'm just going to delete this folder now here. Okay, so right now I look at my audio folder. And before I do that, I'm just going to let's just remove unused files. Just make sure this is clear for everyone. Okay, so we go to our pool window. We can see our snare hits here. So as we want to work with our snare hits, let's jump back to our Finder windows or your Explorer, same concept. Okay, so we'll see. All right, just check my file location here. Okay, so I'm going to move these to our particular folder. So I will. Okay, so now these will all be kind of in. So this is in this particular folder. So this is in Projects Groove Agent SE. So let me just start fresh with this so it's a little clearer. Okay, so these are all my snares. And I'm just going to set like a 1 second spacer between them. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to look into I'm just going to do one more thing just to make sure all the files are set up. Okay, so let's come over here. All right, and I'm just going to check my file path so we could find this. Sorry, it's taking a while. All right. Just want to make sure it's clear when we. Okay, so now if I'm going to do a direct offline processing, we could see these files here, and they're going to be in my projects Hangouts, September 17th, 2021, audio snare. So I'm going to do once more just a backup project. Sorry, I just want to make sure this is easy to understand. Okay, so now we see, all right, so we go to our files here. We see that we're going to do DOP tester, audio, and then we see our snares. So, and let's go to our Finder window. Sorry, it's taking a while to get here. And let's go ahead and we now see all of our files here. So we go to audio, we can see that. So now I'm going to do offline processing. So I will set up a quick direct offline processing, and I'll just do something like a remove DC offset, and we're going to apply that to all of the files. And so now that we've done that, we will see that these files here, we had the original files, but now we have the files that are going to be found in the edits folder. So let's say if I want to do something that was even, we'll just put a delay on it. So let's go ahead and put a delay. Let's make it eighth note delays in all of the files. So, and again, we can see that it's just going to be placed into the edits file here. So now the processed file is now going to be placed into the edits folder. So now when I play this back, we have that process. So all of your direct offline processed files will actually just be placed directly into the edits folder. So that's all you had to do. So your original files will still be there, but if you wanted to then just apply all of the processing, just simply go to your edits folder, and then all of those files will be there for you in the edits folder. So sorry it took a while to get there. All right. All right, so we had a question. Can Greg explain root key? I've talked to musical friends. They are good at music theory. In our language, there is no root key. It is not possible to translate. They understand what root key is, but never heard the word. But they know nothing about new DAW technology. They wonder if root key originates from DAW technology. So the root key, and we could see this just by when we go to some of the settings that we could enable in the info line at top. You know, one of the options that you'll have is for the root key. So let's say if we go here, we see project root key. So as soon as we turn this on, we could now we could set the project root key. So some content, and most content doesn't do this, but a while ago, Steinberg introduced a program called SQL, and a lot of those features have migrated as well as its content into Cubase. So a lot of the MIDI loops can be based on root key. So it's not a general music term, but it is more DAW specific. So generally we would say the key of the song, and maybe there's a key change or a modulation, like you go from the key of C to the key of A, something like that, like a modulation, or you go up a major second from C major to D major. But the root key is specifically dealing with the metadata of a particular loop, so that if you say, okay, I put in a C minor chord or a C seventh chord, that it will take the content, like the SQL MIDI loops that have root key information, and that will be able to not only just transpose up to a D, but we'll say, okay, when we're playing in D and the root key is set to C major, that we're going to play in D minor. So it matches the key. So it is a bit Cubase specific and not general music theory specific, but it's kind of how different content sets will interact with it. Okay, so we had a question, and this is mailed in from Alexander, who I think is on the live stream. I just purchased Spectral Layers Pro yesterday. So the question is it automatically removed my Spectral Layers 1 in Cubase, or do I need to manually remove Spectral Layers 1 and then install Spectral Layers Pro? So once it sees the license, so when you have a Spectral Layers, what it's actually doing is when you install Spectral Layers, it's basically all three versions. So it is Spectral Layers 1, which is a subset of Spectral Layers Elements, which is a subset of Spectral Layers Pro. So, and depending on which license it sees, so if it sees a Cubase 11 license, it knows that unless you have a Spectral Layers Element or Spectral Layers Pro, that it will run to Spectral Layers 1. If you have the Spectral Layers Pro license, when you turn Cubase on, it automatically just turns into Spectral Layers Pro. So it's really one program that could run in three different versions, three different levels, based upon which license you actually own. So once you have a Spectral Layers Pro, all the Spectral Layers 1 features and a whole lot more are in Spectral Layers Pro. So there's no need to have Spectral Layers 1 in addition to Spectral Layers Pro, because the Spectral Layers Pro license includes all of the Spectral Layers 1. So it could be a little confusing because, do I need to install it? But as soon as it sees the license, it runs the licensed version. So if you have the Spectral Layers Pro license, you don't have to reinstall or uninstall anything. When you start up, it just says, hey, okay, we unlocked all the Spectral Layers Pro features, and that's what's running. Okay. So you see, also, I purchased a Groove Agent question. I purchased Groove Agent 5 and extensions for Groove Agent 5. Already bought Marco Miniman studio drums and Simon Phillips studio drums and jazz drums as well. Big purchases. So just quickly answer about your thoughts regarding these libraries. So, I think any of the Simon Phillips content is, remarkably good. So if you haven't seen this, I've been a huge Simon Phillips fan since I saw him, tour with The Who in 1989. Probably I'm dating myself, but Simon is, probably, one of the world's preeminent drummers. So if you wanted to have, Simon Phillips, and it's a wonderful library. And, the cool thing with the Simon Phillips library, if you're not familiar with it, I thought I had it in here. All right, let me just see if I have it in my, try in Groove Agent. Okay, so when I come here, we have the Simon Phillips studio drums. So One is you get Simon's amazing drum kit. So that's always, pretty amazing kit to have that's been used on so many incredible records. But you have Simon playing it too. So, so you get kind of, a wide variety of patterns, but you have all the different levels. Like, I love the snare on that, but you could also, switch between, Simon has 3 different snares available. I mean, he has like a gong tom, so there's no shortage of toms here, or cymbals. But other cool things you could do is, like, with the kick, come over here and you could assign different trigger notes. So once you come over here, you can say, okay, I want it to have more, if you wanted more electronic stuff. And you also will have, full octobans as well. So, once you kind of get into this, I think it's, just a wonderful kit for that. The jazz drums are also equally fantastic. And the jazz drums are really great if you need, stuff with brushes. So let's say we go to the Simon Phillips Jazz kit here. We could just say, okay, just want it to, let's go to the Simon Phillips Jazz drums. So as we do this, and this is something that a lot of people had wanted, was the ability to say, okay, I just want it to have, jazz brush kits, because it could be really difficult to program effectively. But, and once you get into this, having the different patterns and fills, and okay, I wanted to come over here and just, have different levels of complexity. So, and I think for like the Marco Minimum drums, I think are really, it's also I think a wonderful kit. And the patterns are really good if you wanted to do like, different odd meters. I enjoy playing bass with these, like, if I want to feel like I'm going all progressive and, practice. So let's just say we'll do Friday the 13th. So this will probably be. And again, like, what I like about this kit especially is, we see kind of similar concepts here. But, you just kind of turn it on, and it's the sound that people often seek out, because it just kind of gives you that big full sound where you just start off from like a finished product without having to spend hours tweaking it. All right. And we had another question sent in. Is it possible to do render in place with sidechain in Cubase? So I don't think the render in place captures the sidechain. Let's go ahead and take a quick look. I think I have something kind of set up for it, but we can show you a way to capture it. All right, so let's say if I have kind of a sidechain element like a kick and snare here. Just revert this quickly. All right, so say, we have, but I think that what you could do, let me just check my connections one more time here. Let's do another project here. But there is a way that we could actually kind of render or capture the sidechain capability. So let's say I have, and I wanted this track to be sidechain, the compressor to be sidechain from the kick. So I'll activate the sidechain, and now I'll choose the sidechain source. All right, so now we're gonna have this kick drum. So when the kick drum comes in, we'll have the, we'll just have the compressor kick in with that. But if I now render in place, so I don't think that that will capture it over. So let's give it a shot. So it doesn't look like it renders it over. So now, all right, so to mitigate that, if we wanted to get around it, I'm going to send both of these, right click, and I'm going to add a group channel to the selected channels. And then what I want to do here is we're going to create outside. And now I'm going to I'm going to add an audio track and set its input from the group channel we just created. And then just hit record. So now this audio file, as you could see just from the waveform, when we listen to it, we'll solo it. We'll have both of those and the sidechain kind of captured. So even though it's not captured in render in place, you could just hit play and route it through group into an audio track and then capture that. All right, we also had a question mailed in about, is it possible to export a score as a PDF file in Cubase? So let's take a look at a particular file. So let's say I wanted to look at all right, so let's say we have a piano part and we wanted to send this as a PDF so someone could, read it on their tablet and, not have to print out the piece of music. So once we have the scores and we are now switched to page view, what we could do now, so, make sure that the score is in page mode as opposed to edit mode. So now that we're in page mode, at this point, we could go to export, and then we would say scores, and then it will kind of default to like an ATSC file, but you could now just come right over here and export it as a PDF. So at this point, we could just say, okay, let's be someone, piano. We'll save it to our desktop. So now we'll go to our desktop. And there's our PDF that we just made. So once again, once you're in page mode, go to File, to Export Scores, and then it will default to, I think, ATSC textures, but you can have a number of different graphics formats just handled right there for you. All right, we're going to sneak back to live stream here. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Let's see if I can find my place back in the discussion. All right, we see Graham Richards made it. All right. see Jazz Dude's done some moderation for us. Thank you for that. All right. Okay, just finding my spot. Okay, so I just see question: indirect offline processing. Is there a way to resample audio without changing its speed? Also, would like to know how to save presets in direct offline processing. Thanks. So I'm not sure when you say resample audio, if you wanted to change the sample rate or if, you know, what you want it to do. But, you know, as you do it, the files, as we just showed a couple minutes ago, will be placed directly into the edits folder. So also would like to know how to save presets in direct offline processing. So let's say we'll select our file here and get the right. Okay. So once let's say if I use a particular process a lot. So I'll just do it on a new project here so it's less confusing. Okay, so let's say now I'm here, we do our direct offline processing. So let's say if I find myself kind of doing like a particular process over and over again. So I want to normalize the audio. I could just drag it down into here. And at this point, you know, we could choose to, you know, do like that could be my normal process. But let's say I've done a full chain here on this file. So let's say I want to fade in, I want to run it through a bit crusher, I want to run it through Magneto, and I really like this particular setup. I think I could drag all three of these down and we'll give it a name and we'll just call it September 17th. So at this point, if I have another file in and I wanted to have all of those processes applied to this file, I could just select it and drag it up, and those files have been processed just with those particular settings. So now we see the fade in, and if I wanted to just take that off. So if you have a number of different options here, just drag those down and you could have different banks of presets. One other thing that a lot of people miss is if I have, let's say, an audio file here on this track and I have inserts. So let's say I go to my mix console here, we switch to our insert view, and let's say I have a DJ EQ and I want it, you know, reverb, and I want it to have, let's say, auto panner for some reason. All right, so I have all these different processes and I have that file selected. I could just drag all of my inserts over and that could populate my processing as well. Or you could come over here and choose to insert, you know, track presets if you want it to. So you could have different banks, different favorites. So if you wanted to, apply track presets as well, those could all be, different forms of presets for the direct offline processor. All right, so we see Max Arrington says, I'm new to Cubase. The club is extremely helpful. Thanks. That's great. Thanks for joining us and being part of the community. We see Graham Witcher just needs some ice cream. So it's late in the UK. So maybe Michael Teams, I'm sure, will work on it. Okay, so I just see from Jeff Sabelski, Greg, what are we looking at and how to interpret the graph of the phase scope window to interpret what is going on and if something needs to be corrected or adjusted for a more focused track? All right, so let's take a look at, come here, so all right, so let's say I have this mix down of this file here. All right, so from the Hot Mess CD here. So, all right, so let's say we're looking at this and I want to go to all right, so let's say I want to take this file. So this is a really good kind of phase relationship that we see here. But let's say I want to take this, and what I want to do is I'm just going to invert the phase. And so when inverting the phase, you'll notice that it will get more. Let's see if I could. Here, I'll just see if I split this up. I'm going to split just one channel. So let's see if I could do this really quickly here, just to kind of show this. So. All right, so now I'm going to have the left and right channels here. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to invert the phase. So when we see the frequencies, these particular frequencies are the ones that are phase. So let's say I'll come here now and just... So let's invert the phase of one of the channels, and you'll see this kind of go from a very kind of healthy square, and then now we look at it, you're going to hear that the frequencies are going to be cut off, and you see this go more horizontal, and you see that these are the particular frequencies that are now kind of causing phase problems, when you see it kind of being only on one axis like that. And let's say, okay, let's... So when you see it more vertical and kind of more rounded, that's a healthier phase relationship. And I take one of the channels of the stereo and flip it. You see this goes more horizontal, and you see this is indicating that these particular frequencies are out of phase. So after a while, so when you see this is like a really good phase relationship. So Michael Teams and Gareth and Pablo did a wonderful job. And now when you do that, you can just hear it and kind of see the relationships going. So more horizontal is generally bad, red bad. And you can hear what a difference that makes in the sound. So, and it's a wonderful song by Michael Teams and Gareth and Pablo. They just let me play bass on it. So. All right, read through some more questions. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, so we have Dominic checking in, so thanks for joining us. All right, so Graham Witcher's going to hit the like button. That's great. All right, so we have a question. Is it possible to change the tempo within the project without affecting the video? It is a short animated one. So generally, you know, when we work with video, the video isn't going to really be affected by tempo changes. So because it, you know, the video doesn't have like a BPM per se. But let me see if I have a project here. I'll just go ahead and open up a quick video project. So, you know, as we have a video file imported here and I change the tempo, the video isn't affected. Just the audio or MIDI information will be affected. So if I just say, okay, let's make it 78 beats a minute. The video plays back. So, you know, the video is going to be kind of the constant thing. So since it doesn't have a relationship to BPM, it's its own entity with its own timing that's not affected by tempo changes. All right, wonderful to see Gareth on the live stream. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see from Jarlath Quinn. So you're just saying Simon Phillips is a top drummer. So yeah, I mean, played with Toto for a number of years, and just a really sweet, wonderful guy too. So got to help him out over the last few years. Just and tells me all sorts of great John Entwistle stories, which I always love. All right, so just see from Jeff Zabelski, I'd like to use the Jerry Coker chord type, jazz chord types, using the musical system like 1, 2, 7, 3, 7, 4, 5, with score. Then modulations are quick and easy to read for sure. So yeah, Cubase doesn't have that, but if you have Dorco, and I believe, Jeff, that you have Dorco elements, that the chords in there's a chord preset for Nashville number system, which will do that. So it's like one of the few tools that will allow you to do Nashville numbers. So, all right. All right, reading through comments. So just see a question. Greg, is sidechain used mostly in EDM music? Just lost a question. So that's where it's used a lot. But you know, a lot of times there were, you know, there were uses of it for a kick and bass, like electric bass on rock tracks. I've even heard of, I've seen engineers like in 80s hard rock stuff where the snare was like so important to have like a huge snare drum that they would, almost, send everything to its own, uh, send every other track to a group and then sidechain the group from the snare so the snare was out. We also see it a lot in dialogue in films, so that when the main person is talking, that everything else kind of gets ducked down for intelligibility. So there's a lot of creative uses for sidechaining as well. All right. So I see Jarla saying my sidechain destroyer always makes me think of U2's intro to Magnificent. I guess I have to listen to it. So just something I put together before I had to do a demo a long time ago. Yeah, we see, and Michael Pierce also has like of ducking reverbs on vocals and stuff like that. So I just see a question. Hey, Greg, should I use UV22HR for dithering to 16-bit before converting to MP3 320? So, it can't hurt to have a good, you're probably losing more in the MP3 conversion than in the dithering stage. But if you're doing kind of I see a lot of people who, once they have everything done, they do an MP3 version of their song, do the mix down at the highest resolution and then convert that file to, so if you're doing everything, in a 32-bit floating point or 64-bit floating point environment mix engine in Cubase, keep it at the highest level as you can. It's not like hard drives are prohibitively expensive for their size ratio. So keep it at the highest resolution and take that high resolution mix file and then convert that to, MP3s and stuff like that. So. Okay, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great discussion and questions. All right, we see Faces Forever just wants to create a monster plugin for Cubase that no one can live without and sell for $20 a download. Go for 100. Why not? 49. Dream. Go big. All right, just read through more comments. All right. All right, so we see Graham Witcher likes the dark glass songs. It's fun. Fun to be involved. All right, so just see when you changed the phase in the scope, did did physically change them on a channel. So what I did in that process is just find a project here. So, all right. So I just took one of the cool things that you can do in Cubase is like if you have, let's say we have 2 tracks playing here, is you could select one, and from the info line, you could just choose to invert phase. So I'm just taking this track. Now, what's interesting, and this actually just kind of inverts phase, but let's say if we look at the waveforms, and this is the really interesting thing about phase. So we can see that, like, you know, where this waveform is going down in the left channel, it's going down in the right channel, where this one will kind of go up, it'll go up. But if we kind of flip the phase on this, so let's say, okay, we're invert the phase on, you can see that where one channel is going down, the other one is going in the opposite direction. And that was what causes those frequencies to cancel out, because they're kind of fighting each other there. So that now, but all I was doing is just kind of I selected one file and I was just flipping the phase on and off just from the info line, which is really helpful to do. So nothing sneaky, and we're just kind of watching it in the Supervision plugin. All right, so we have David M. joining us from Liverpool. So he's great when you're on. Thanks for joining. All right, so we see, is the music mix for cartoons the same as audio only? So, you know, when I know people are doing a lot of animated films and cartoons and stuff. So yeah, it's just straight audio that's going to be done. You know, in old days was obviously like real musicians being captured, but a lot of times it's just going to be using samples now. So. All right, I hear my son is back from school, so I may get interrupted soon. All right, reading through. Okay, reading through some more. All right, hang on just 1 second. All right, so I'm back. Sorry about the interruption. My son had a good day in school. All right. Still, all right, reading through some great discussion. So people comparing Bach to Bachman Turner Overdrive. All right, so okay, so we have if this is duplication, I can look it up later. Can basic guitar tab be easily created in Cubase? So yeah, so if you have MIDI parts, let me just go to, I think we have some guitars in one project here. Let me open up another one. Has some kind of more MIDI guitars that I was thinking of. So if you have the MIDI parts, we can just come. Why always? All right, so let's look at this, and now I'll come over here. We'll just switch to tablature mode. And at this point, we can now just see the guitar tablature laid out for us, just right like that. So once you have some of the music, just click on tablature mode. You could adjust, if you wanted to do different tuning or for bass, you could also, just come over here, do independent string tunings, and you could move it to different strings as you see fit. So all right, thanks for all the great comments. Just reading through. All right, so we see Faces Forever. Just think about the $100. Sounds great. And $49. Yeah, just do your Black Friday sale, $49 and $100. Then people think they're getting a deal. See, Michael Pierce saying that gets weird close to listening to inverted phase channels is listening to the side of a mid-side split. That often breaks my brain. So yeah, it's frustrating. I have a local restaurant that has their kind of like playback system. The speakers are out of phase, and I just keep wanting to go to them. Can I just go to your receiver and just switch the cables, please? So it will sound much better. Okay, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. Again, we'll be doing our live stream on Tuesday. All right, we have Daniel checking in from Munich. Thanks for joining us. So it just says, I bought 10, wasn't following since. So does the upgrade cost? So yeah, there is an upgrade cost to going to 11. So, there was a version 10, a version 10.5, and then version 11. So you could check just looking at looks like maybe you're in Asia just from the name. But you could check with the Steinberg online shop or local dealer to see about the upgrade cost. If you go to steinberg.net and just click on shop Cubase, and just say you want to upgrade, and then it will automatically kind of do the currency for your local country. So it might be $199 US, but I could be mistaken, and depends what country you're in. right, just going through more comments. All right. Okay, read through more comments. All right, so just see question, what's the main difference between Cubase 10 and 11? So Cubase 11, let's just switch projects here. Sorry about that. Let me just jump to... All right, so Cubase 11 will features global tracks, so that within the MIDI key editor, you could look. So let's say if I'm here within the MIDI key editor, you could have global tracks. You could say, okay, I wanted a ruler, my marker, my chord track. So you could have markers, everything kind of directly inside of the key editor itself. There's going to be better MIDI CC handling. There's going to be improvements to pitch bend, where you could actually have the pitch bend show semitones grid, and you could have it automatically snap to semitones. So as you click here, you could say, okay, now it's just going to be snapping to being in tune. So you could do that quite easily in version 11. You could work with MIDI CCs and paste them better. There's going to be scale assistance, so you could only see notes that are being used in the project, or only notes within the scale. And you could colorize and show. You could create your own custom scales for that. There's going to be additional audio plugins. So you'll have some additional plugins like Squasher. So we can think of this as an up-down compressor. So we'll come right over here. So we'll have that. We're going to have an update to frequency. So when we want to come over here, we could say under EQ. So frequency is now in version 11 a dynamic EQ, that you could have dynamic EQ control on different channels. And when we go into the imager, that we could just have a multi-band imager plugin, so that we could just make the low end more mono or stronger. It will come with Spectral Layers 1 as an audio editing that you could do as an extension. So if I wanted to come over here, let's say if I had a file that I wanted to remove, maybe like a 2-track recording, and I wanted to remove the vocal from a recording, or just do kind of frequency dependent editing, that we're going to have that capability. So you get Spectral Layers 1. Also, when we do your export audio mixdown, we could have job cues. So as we do mixdowns, we could say, I want to take all these and mix it down to a 48K file. I want to create stems at 44.1. I need to create stems in quad. I need to create stems in mono. I need to create stems in stereo. I need this without, with only these particular tracks selected. So the export audio cues will allow you to do multiple exports and then be able to just have all of those automatically rendered for you without like you having to do it one by one. And there's like 100 other little tiny things that will be included as well. So, but those are some of the main highlights, and I'm sure I'm missing like a big main theme, but but those are some of the things found in version 11 over 10. All right, so I just see, is there a Cubase 12? And he's just not on the latest. So I'm on the latest version, so I'm on 11.03. So Cubase 12 isn't out or hasn't been announced yet. So so I see, is there a way to change the playback speed to halftime or double time when auditioning loops in Media Bay? That would be so helpful. So currently when they're auditioning, it's going to be tied to the project tempo. But you could, let's say, if we have our tempo at 97 BPM, you could, if you really wanted to, if you go to the project logical editor, you could hit one button that would trigger project logical editor preset. So you can say media type is equal to tempo, and I wanted to trim, and let's say multiply by 2. And now if I just come here, let's say we're at 97 beats a minute, I could just, come over here and multiply the tempo by 2 or divide it by 2. But there's nothing in the preview that would be double or half tempo. But I'll pass that along. All right. So we see Michael Team saying, I'm lucky to remember one thing from the live stream. Thanks to Greg and Jan for the index. They are La Leche. All right. Thanks for the kind words. Yeah, we're always grateful for Jan for compiling the Cubase index site from great comment from Graham. What is so wonderful about this forum, we absolutely respect each other wherever we are, whatever stage we are with Cubase or music. It really quite feels like we have a family here, so that's great. I think it's a wonderful group, and I feel lucky to be a part of it. All right, so we see a question from Daniel. I was trying the Phi version of SQL. Is there a problem to Halion 6 SE in Cubase 11 while deinstalling SQL again, or will anything running well afterwards? Any experiences yet? So I don't think if you uninstall SQL that the content for Halion and Halion instrument will be automatically carried over, and probably the latest versions in Cubase 11 would automatically kind of replace that. So I think you are not going to have any problems losing content uninstalling SQL. Okay, so I see when you set up the question, when you set up the control room, it appears that only the play icon won't play parts when clicked. Why is that? So right now I have this set up. All right, and when I go to the play icon, I guess it's this. That seems to be kind of working. So it could be, you know, that there is a preference that might throw this off. So if you go to preferences to control room, make sure that you don't have use phones for channel as preview channel. So I think if that is enabled as a preference, that you're not going to hear it, that it gets routed through the phones channel instead. So, you know, try coming over here and make sure that get a preferences to control room that use phones channel for preview isn't activated. And then, but you should be able to kind of hear it as expected. It's a great George Casas, who passed away last year, I think. Wonderful bassist. All right. All right, so I think I may be near the end of questions. We'll see if there's so, okay, here's a question. Sorry, came late, but would like to know, when is Black Friday deal for Cubase 11 Pro? So, you know, generally Black Friday deals are on Black Friday. So usually that's November. So, but there was a big promotion in June for Cubase Pro and Cubase Artist as well. So we see a question from Dan Freeman. Does Cubase have a plugin for auto fix phase issues? So it doesn't, you know, sometimes people intentionally will record stuff out of phase for a particular effect, but if you want it to, you know, just audition phase, if you go to the EQ, there's a phase option right here on the channel EQ in the pre section. So you could just click directly there and that would invert the phase, or so that would do it as a plugin. So instead of having to have a specific plugin, it's just part of the channel strip. Like, you know, most consoles will have an EQ and send, so it's just part of the channel strip. Like most consoles will have that, but if you wanted to physically change and edit the waveform, you could just do it from the particular invert phase function right there. Okay, so I think I'm at the end of the live questions. We'll see if there's any more that come up. I know we just have like a minute or two left, and if not, we will wrap up our Friday just a couple minutes early. Hang on just one second, my son's knocking. Yes. All right. So let's see. So make sure I hit a button on my console here. Make sure my voice is still going through. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay. You see from Best Green Jesus, hopefully have some questioning for the next stream. It's been a busy week, so it's great. Yeah, just no problem. You could, I'm sure, pick up hopefully a couple tips and tricks from other people's questions. Okay. Let me see. Cubase Junkie has made it. All right. Okay, so I'll just wait another 30 seconds or so. If there's not any more questions, we'll wrap up. And we see everyone on Tuesday. We hope that everyone is able to stay safe and healthy over the weekend, and make some great music, learn some new features in Cubase. And we will get started on Tuesday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thanks again for all the help from Jazz Dude for his moderation and for Jan for his Cubase index. And also for the Cubase Nation Discord. Check that out. And we will see everyone on Tuesday. Have a great weekend. Goodbye.